It was the last day of school before Memorial Day weekend in 1979, when 6-year-old Edion Patz, a bright, curious boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an infectious smile, begged his mother for the independence of walking to the school bus stop. Alone for the first time? The bus stop was only 2 blocks from their Manhattan apartment, visible from the doorway. And in a city that still carried a certain innocence, his mother Julie agreed, handing him $1 for a soda at the corner store. That morning, the sun was warm, the air filled with the hum of a city heading into a long weekend. And Eitan stepped out with his book bag, his dreams of small adventures ahead. But by afternoon, the Patz family's world had been torn apart. Hetten never came home. Calls to the school revealed he had never arrived, and his friends hadn't seen him at the bus stop. Panic set in. Julie dialed the police, and what followed became one of the largest missing child investigations in New York City's history. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, questioned workers at the corner store, knocked on doors late into the night, driven by the urgency of a missing 6-year-old. For Detective Bill Butler, himself a father of 6, the case became a personal mission. Every missing child photo, every lead felt like chasing his own son. But days turned to weeks, and the city watched as Eitan's photograph appeared on storefront windows, in newspapers, and eventually on milk cartons, his face becoming a symbol for missing children everywhere. Stan Patz, a professional photographer, shared intimate pictures of his son's life, showing the boy who always saw the positive in everything, hoping the public might remember a detail, citing anything that could bring him home. Yet the search yielded nothing but pain, and in the shadows of Washington Square Park, a name began to emerge: Jose Antonio Ramos. A known pedophile, Ramos was disturbingly confident when he told investigators he was 90% sure he had met Eitan in the park that day. Found with photos of young boys who resembled Eitan, he admitted taking a child back to his apartment, but he claimed to have let him go. The evidence was disturbing, but incomplete. Detectives chased leads that took them to drainage tunnels, apartment, furnaces, and even rumors of cult activity. Ramos was eventually convicted in another state for child molestation, but there was never enough to charge him for Eitan's disappearance. The Patz family, desperate for answers, pursued a civil case. And in 2001, a court declared Eitan legally dead-end unthinkable formality that broke their hearts. The civil suit found Ramos liable for Eitan's wrongful death, but for Stan and Julie, justice still felt like a stranger. For decades, the case remained cold, files collecting dust until 2010, when a new district attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr., reopened it with fresh eyes. The FBI rejoined the search, and soon a new name surfaced: Pedro Hernandez. A quiet man who had once worked as a stock boy at the very corner store near the bus stop where Eitan was last seen. The lead came from his brother-in-law, who recalled Hernandez making haunting admissions over the years about harming a boy in New York. Police approached Hernandez. The moment he realized why they were there, the color drained from his face. He agreed to talk, spending 6 hours speaking with investigators before cameras were turned on. Then, on tape, he told them his story. He said he saw Eitan outside the store, offered him a soda, and lured him into the basement. There Hernandez claimed he choked the boy until he was still, placed his small body in a box, and carried it away, leaving it with the trash for collection. As he signed a missing poster of Eitan with the words, "I am sorry," investigators followed him on a walkthrough of the scene, noting details like a basement door that had been added after 1979, tales they believed only the killer could have known. In May 2012, Pedro Hernandez was arrested. For the Patz family, it was a moment of shock and fragile hope, but the road ahead was far from certain. At trial, the defense argued Hernandez was mentally ill, with a low IQ and a tendency to imagine events. There was no physical evidence, only his confession. The jury deliberated for 18 days, unable to reach a verdict, with one juror holding out over doubts about the confession's reliability. A mistrial was declared, and the heartbreak for the Patz family deepened. But prosecutors were determined. In 2017, Hernandez was retried. This time, the jury found him guilty of murder and kidnapping, sentencing him to 25 years to life nearly for decades after Eton's disappearance. In the courtroom, Stan and Julie finally heard the word guilty attached to the name of a man they believed had taken their son. But closure was elusive. Eton's body was never found. His memory remains frozen at 6 years old, a little boy smiling into his father's camera, full of light and possibility. His case forever changed how America responds to missing children, leading to greater awareness, new laws, and a legacy of vigilance. And for those who knew him, and for millions who only knew his face from milk cartons and posters, Etan Patz will always be the boy who should have made it to the bus stop, the boy whose absence still echoes through New York streets. 2. Cherry Mahan, 1985, Pennsylvania *. It was February 22, 1985, in the quiet rural community of Cabot, Pennsylvania, a place where neighbors waved at each other from their porches, where children's laughter could be heard echoing through the hills, and where danger was something you read about in faraway cities, not something that lived on your own road. 8-year-old Cherry Mahan was a bright, bubbly girl with hazel eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the dull light of a winter afternoon.
Right.
That day was an ordinary Friday, the kind that blends into hundreds of others in childhood. She wore her favorite denim skirt and a brown winter jacket, her hair pulled back neatly, her school books tucked safely in her bag. The yellow school bus rumbled down the narrow road in the late afternoon, carrying the same familiar faces it always did, including Cherry. As the bus slowed to a stop near the end of the gravel drive that led to her home, Cherry stood, smiling politely at the driver as she prepared to step down. The bus's brakes hissed, its door creaked open, and the cold air rushed in. Cherry hopped onto the packed snow, her boots making soft, crunching sounds, and started the short walk toward her house, just 100 yards away. The bus driver watched her for a moment, as was routine, before pulling away to continue the route. But somewhere in those next few steps, in that impossibly short distance, Cherry vanished from sight. It was the kind of disappearance that defies reason, the kind where a child is visible one moment, gone the next without a trace. Neighbors later reported seeing a distinctive van parked near the bus stop that day. It was described as a 1976 Dodge, faded green or possibly bluish in color, with a mural of a snow-capped mountain and a skier painted on its side, the kind of detail that burned itself into people's memories because of its strangeness. It wasn't the type of van you forgot, even in a small town where unusual vehicles stood out. The van's engine may have been running. Someone inside may have been watching, waiting. That image, the child walking home, the mysterious van, became the foundation of the investigation. When Cherry didn't arrive home within minutes, her mother Janice looked out the window, expecting to see her daughter bounding up the driveway. Instead, the drive was empty. At first, she thought maybe Cherry had stopped to talk to a neighbor or play in the snow for a moment, but as the minutes passed and the light began to fade, that small unease grew into a tight knot of fear. Anna stepped outside, calling her daughter's name into the still winter air. Out the sound carried, but there was no answer, just the quiet rustle of wind in the bare trees. Her calls grew louder, sharper, urgency replacing casual concern, and then came the dread, the primal, gut-wrenching sense that something was terribly wrong. She called the police. Within the hour, the narrow road near the bus stop was crowded with law enforcement vehicles. Officers in heavy coats combed through the snowbanks and roadside ditches with flashlights, their beams cutting through the early evening darkness. Neighbors joined in, searching barns, sheds, and tree lines. The bus driver was questioned repeatedly. The last confirmed sighting of Cherry was her stepping off that bus. No one saw her reach her driveway. No one saw her enter her home. That van, the one with the skier mural, was the only possible clue. But even that lead went cold almost as soon as it was discovered. The search for Cherry stretched late into the night. The cold biting through gloves and boots, the snow crunching under the boots of searchers as they moved in tight lines. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights scanning the fields. while K-9 units followed scent trails that faded inexplicably near the road. The next morning, the community awoke to the grim realization that Cherry had not simply wandered. Off she had been taken. News crews arrived, their cameras capturing the tear-streaked face of Janice as she pleaded for her daughter's return. Posters with Cherry's school photos were printed and distributed, her innocent smile staring out from bulletin boards, store windows, and gas stations. The FBI became involved. Investigators interviewed every registered vehicle owner in the area who might match the van's description, but no match was ever confirmed. The mural detail made the case more frustrating. It was too unusual to be common, yet too elusive to lead to an arrest. Weeks turned into months, and the hope of finding Cherry alive began to dim. The community held vigils, lit candles in church windows, and kept porch lights burning through the night, but the investigation dragged on with no breakthroughs. Rumors swirled, whispers of strangers seen in the area in the days before her disappearance, stories of unmarked vans. On country roads, speculation about someone in the community hiding dark secrets. None of it brought Cherry home. Years later, the pain of not knowing still gripped Janice. In an interview, she spoke about the cruelest moment of all, receiving a letter in the mail from someone claiming to know where her daughter was. The letter was mocking, taunting, as if written by someone taking pleasure in her suffering. It offered no real information, only inflicted more wounds on a heart already torn apart. Law enforcement traced the letter, but it led nowhere as decades passed. Cherry's case became one of Pennsylvania's most haunting unsolved disappearances. Her story was featured on television programs like Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted, each time bringing a new wave of tips and false leads. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children produced age-progressed photos, showing what Cherry might look like as a teenager, as a young woman, as an adult. Each image was a painful reminder for Janice of the birthdays missed, the milestones stolen, school dances, graduations, wedding days that would never come. The mystery of the van remains one of the most enduring questions. Did its driver know Cherry? Was it a stranger passing through? Or was it a deliberate lure, chosen to stand out in a way that distracted from identifying its true owner? The van, if it even existed beyond the fleeting memory of witnesses, became a ghost in the investigation, always present, never caught. Through the years, investigators have pursued countless suspects, chased tips across state lines, and reopened the case multiple times with new technology. DNA testing, database searches, and forensic re-examinations of the original evidence have all been employed, but none have cracked the case. Each time the file is reopened, there's a flicker of hope, followed by the familiar silence of a lead. That goes nowhere. Today, Cherry Mahone's disappearance is more than just a case file. It's a wound carried by a family that has endured decades of unanswered questions. For Janice, the search is not over. She still keeps her daughter's memory alive, speaking to reporters, urging the public not to forget. She describes Cherry not just as a victim, but as a little girl who loved riding her bike, playing with friends, and helping around the house. A girl who should have grown up in the safety of her small town, but instead vanished within sight of her home. In the years since 1985, thousands of children have been reported missing in the United States. Most are found quickly, safe, and unharmed. But some cases, like Cherry's, remain unsolved, their names whispered in the same breath as the word why. Why her? Why that day? Why in those few steps between the bus and her front door? For her mother, the questions are a constant companion. I still believe someone out there knows something, Janice has said. It's time for them to come forward. Cherry's story is a reminder of how quickly life can change, how a moment's walk can vanish into decades of searching. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always lurk in faraway cities. Sometimes it waits quietly on a familiar road. And it's a reminder that behind every missing child poster is not just a face, but a life full of memories, laughter, and love that deserves to be found. 3. Amy Billig, 1974. Florida * Amy Billig was a vibrant 17-year-old living in Coconut Grove, Florida, a peaceful, artsy part of Miami, known for its bohemian charm. She had long, dark hair, a kind smile, and eyes that reflected the brightness of someone who embraced life with an open heart. She was like many teenagers in the 1970s, full of youthful energy, exploring the world in her own way. It was a time when hitchhiking wasn't the dangerous activity it's often considered today back then. It was a way for young people to travel, meet new people, and experience freedom. Amy, with her free spirit, often enjoyed hitchhiking too. Different parts of Miami, always in search of something new, an adventure, a story, a new connection. That was the case on the morning of March 6, 1974. When Amy left home, telling her mother that she was heading out for a day of adventure, she set out from her home in Coconut Grove, her thumb extended in the classic gesture of a hitchhiker. Her destination was unknown, but that was the thrill of it. She loved the freedom, the unpredictability, the possibility of meeting new people. Amy was last seen by a neighbor who witnessed her hitchhiking near the busy streets of Coconut Grove. The stranger she was seen with was driving a car. Though little is known about the man or what happened after that brief interaction. At the time, her mother, Ruth Billig, wasn't immediately worried. Amy had disappeared before, but always returned later that evening. She was a teenager, exploring her world on her own terms. But by the evening, Amy didn't return. The familiar dread of a mother's instinct began to sink in. Ruth made the first call to the police around 7 p.m. when she realized Amy hadn't come back home. They didn't immediately raise alarms, thinking she might just be staying at a friend's house. However, hours turned to days, and no one had seen or heard from Amy. Her belongings were left behind. Nothing seemed out of place in her room. It's just her absence. Ruth's heart raced as she began calling all of Amy's friends. But no one had heard from her. It was the beginning of a mother's nightmare, the sinking realization that something was terribly wrong. The search for Amy Billig was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The neighborhood was filled with concerned faces, and local authorities were soon involved. Police canvassed the area, asking neighbors if they had seen anything unusual, but no one had. No one had seen Amy since that day. There were no leads, and her disappearance began to feel like a riddle with no solution. Friends and family posted flyers, desperate to find someone who had seen Amy or heard something that could explain her disappearance. But as days turned into weeks, the once thriving hope began to fade. There were no clues, no phone calls, no messages. It was as if Amy had simply vanished. The case, however, gained attention when it was linked to a theory that would prove to be as confusing as it was chilling. The motorcycle gang theory. Amy had been seen around Miami at the time, in places where motorcycle gangs often gathered. There were rumors that Amy might have been lured into the clutches of one of these groups with a history of unsavory activities. The theory seemed plausible. In the 1970s, motorcycle gangs were known for their chaotic and criminal activities, and some investigators speculated that Amy had been taken by one of them. But no one could confirm it. Was it possible? It didn't sit right with Ruth or the police. The theory wouldn't go away. Despite the haunting whispers of the motorcycle gang theory, the case seemed to stall. No arrests were made and no suspects came forward. Then in 1975, something strange happened, a breakthrough of sorts. A camera was found which seemed to provide a potential clue about Amy's fate. The camera contained a roll of film, and when it was developed, it revealed photographs that seemed to show a young woman, one who looked remarkably like Amy, engaged with some people near a motorcycle gang's hangout. The photographs were chilling, but they didn't provide enough to identify the people in the images or link them to the disappearance. The discovery was a short-lived ray of hope that soon dimmed. The camera's link to Amy was never confirmed beyond doubt. As the years passed, the images were analyzed, but nothing concrete ever came of them. The gang theory continued to be investigated, but, like so many theories in unsolved cases, it ended in frustration. The police could never find enough evidence to prove the connection. In the midst of it all, Ruth Billig held on to her belief that Amy was out there somewhere, lost but alive. She never gave up hope. But as time went on, Amy's case faded from the headlines. The public's interest waned, and investigators moved on to other cases. Passing years did nothing to diminish the pain for Ruth and her family. Every day without answers felt like a betrayal. Amy's life, her dreams, her future was stolen in a single moment. And no one seemed to know who was responsible or where she had gone. Amy's case remained unsolved, and as the years turned into decades, the story of her disappearance remained a cold file in the Miami police archives. The motorcycle gang theory persisted, but never materialized into a credible lead. The camera, once thought to be the key to solving the mystery, became a haunting symbol of the many false hopes that would come to define Amy's case. In the 1980s, Ruth Billig started a campaign to keep her daughter's name in the public eye, even as time and hope were thin. She reached out to news outlets, hoping to bring attention to Amy's case, but as the years went by, the number of people who remembered Amy's face and name slowly dwindled. Ruth even spoke to media outlets about the torment of not knowing, of wondering where her daughter might be, and of the terror that still gnawed at her every day. By the 1990s, the case was still open, though it was largely dormant. However, Ruth Billig would not allow Amy's name to fade from the public consciousness. She spoke at missing persons events, joined organizations supporting families of the disappeared, and continued to search for answers, even as the world moved on. Ruth became a quiet but determined voice for the countless others who, like her, had lost a child and never gotten the closure they deserved. The years, however, didn't bring any clarity. The camera remained a mystery. The gang theory never led to a breakthrough, and the police were no closer to finding out what happened to Amy. Ruth grew older, the weight of the unanswered questions ever heavier. Her fight for justice, though, never ceased. Amy's disappearance, it seemed, would be an unresolved chapter in the history of Florida's missing persons cases. Conclusion: a life lost. A memory preserved, though Amy's case remains unsolved. The legacy of her disappearance has left a lasting impact. It highlighted the vulnerability of hitchhikers in the 1970s, the shadowy world of motorcycle gangs, and the complexities of missing persons investigations. Ruth Billig, even in her advanced years, continues to advocate for her daughter's memory. Amy Billig was a young woman with so much potential, with a future that was stolen in the blink of an eye. Her case serves as a reminder of the untold stories of so many other missing children victims of violence or abduction. Their families left behind with only unanswered questions and heartache. Amy's story may have faded from the headlines, but it lives on in the hearts of those who loved her, and in the legacy of missing persons cases that still demand justice today. 4. Molly Bish's disappearance, 2000. 16-year-old Molly Bish was the kind of girl who radiated positivity. Long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a bright smile that made everyone around her feel like the world was a little bit brighter. Molly had a lightness about her that was impossible to ignore. She was a typical teenager in the small, quiet town of Warren, Massachusetts, living a carefree life in a family that adored her. She loved the water, the feeling of the sun on her skin, and most of all, her job as a lifeguard at Comans Pond, a peaceful place tucked away in the woods where families came to swim on warm summer days. Molly's life was full of promise. She had plans for the future, dreams of college, and a warm, supportive family who cheered her on in everything she did. Her mother, Maggie Bish, and father, John Bish, were proud of their daughter, but like any parent, they always worried especially. When Molly was out working as a lifeguard alone at the pond, that morning on June 27, 2000, was like so many others during the summer months. Molly got up, grabbed her lifeguard whistle and sunscreen, and headed off to work. It was a typical Tuesday, with the sun shining down and the pond full of families, enjoying a perfect summer day. It was supposed to be just another ordinary shift for Molly, but that day would be anything but ordinary. Molly never came home. By that evening, when Molly didn't return home, her parents' initial concerns turned into panic. Maggie called the pond, expecting to hear that Molly was just hanging out with friends or that she had stayed late to finish her shift. But the call went unanswered. Molly's lifeguard stand was empty. Her car was still in the parking lot. Her personal belongings, her lifeguard whistle, sunglasses, and shoes were found neatly placed by the shore. Nothing seemed out of place, except for the absence of Molly herself. Her sudden disappearance felt like a bad dream, one that no one wanted to believe. The police arrived quickly, but the initial search efforts were far from easy. The local law enforcement teams scoured the area around the pond, diving into the waters, hoping to find any sign of Molly. They retraced her steps, interviewed witnesses, and began piecing together the events of the day she vanished. A witness had recalled seeing Molly talking to a man near the pond earlier in the day, but the details were hazy. Was it a passerby? Stranger? Was there anything suspicious about their conversation? Nobody could say for sure. But one thing was certain: Molly was gone, and no one knew why. Over the next few days, as the news of Molly's disappearance spread, the entire town of Warren came together. The local community rallied around Molly's parents, holding vigils, putting up flyers, and organizing search parties. People came from neighboring towns from all over Massachusetts to help find her. The search quickly became the largest in Massachusetts history, spanning miles of dense woods and fields, combing through every inch of Comins Pond and its surrounding areas. The town, once tranquil and calm, was now filled with a palpable sense of fear, and the community's collective heartbreak was felt by everyone involved. Despite the fervent efforts, nothing was found. Days turned into weeks, and the search continued with little to no progress. The emotional toll on Molly's family was indescribable. Every day, they clung to the hope that Molly would come home, that this was just some tragic mistake that would eventually be explained away. But as the weeks passed with no answers, the reality of the situation began to sink in. 3 long years passed before Molly's case took a tragic turn. In 2003, after nearly 1,000 days of searching, Molly's remains were found in the woods near the pond where she had last been seen. They had been hidden in a place that no one had thought to look just a few miles from the pond. On a stretch of land not far from where her lifeguard stand had once stood, the discovery was devastating for Molly's family. For Maggie and John, it was the moment their worst fears had been confirmed. Their daughter was gone, and they would never see her smile again, never hear her laugh, never have the chance to hold her in their arms. The remains were identified through DNA testing, and the news broke like a shockwave through the community. Molly's family finally had answers, but the questions remained: what had happened to Molly? Why was she taken? Who was responsible for her death? The investigation had no clear answers. There were no suspects, no clear motive, just an overwhelming sense of loss and confusion. Who could do something so monstrous to a young girl full of life and potential? And why would anyone hurt her? As investigators continued to sift through the evidence, one theory began to emerge that would shape the investigation for years to come. The possibility that Molly's killer was someone who had been hiding in plain sight. Witnesses had mentioned a man in his 40s, a stranger who had been seen lurking near the pond, acting strangely and watching the lifeguards. Some speculated that he had been stalking the area, waiting for an opportunity. Others believed that the killer could be someone who had been familiar with the pond, someone who knew the area well and could have taken Molly without being noticed. A pivotal clue that surfaced was a witness report about a man who was seen leaving the area in a white car. Though the details were vague and no one could definitively identify him in the years that followed, law enforcement continued to follow, up on hundreds of tips, but none of them led to an arrest. With every lead that turned out to be a dead end, the mystery only deepened. The case grew colder with time, and it became clear that, without new evidence, the chances of solving Molly's murder were growing slimmer by the day. Theories swirled about the possible involvement of local motorcycle gangs, who were known to frequent the area in the 1970s and 1980s. Some speculated that they could have been involved in Molly's disappearance, but nothing concrete ever emerged. Law enforcement explored the theory but was never able to connect it to the crime. Molly's case became part of a larger, unsolved pattern of disappearances and crimes that stretched across the state, leading to more questions than answers. Still, the community remained vigilant. Molly's parents continued to search for the truth, holding on to the hope that someday, Someone would come forward with the information needed to solve the case. Molly Bish's disappearance left a lasting impact on Massachusetts and the United States as a whole. It became a symbol of the risks young women face and the vulnerability of those who work in public spaces, like lifeguards. Her case prompted changes in public safety laws, including the creation of Molly's Law, which required lifeguards and other public workers to undergo additional background checks. Though her case remains unsolved, Molly's name has become synonymous with the fight for justice for missing and murdered children. The Molly Bish Center for the Prevention of Child Abduction was established in her honor. As a way to continue raising awareness about child safety and abduction prevention, Molly Bish's story is not just about a tragic disappearance. It is a story of the strength of a community, the resilience of a family, and the search for justice that continues to this day. Though the man responsible for her death has never been found, Molly's legacy lives on. Her bright smile, her zest for life, and her love for helping others remain forever etched in the hearts of those who knew her. For Maggie and John, every day without their daughter is still a painful reminder of the moment their world was shattered. But they continue to speak out, to keep Molly's memory alive, and to fight for justice. Hoping that one day the truth will come to light, Molly's case is a haunting reminder that even the smallest, most peaceful towns can harbor dark secrets, and that the search for justice can sometimes take a lifetime. But for Molly Bish, and for the countless others who have vanished too soon, the hope for closure and justice remains unbroken. Part 5. Beverly Potts' Disappearance, 1951. In the summer of 1951, Cleveland, Ohio, was a city filled with hope. The hum of post-war optimism still lingering in the air. For 10-year-old Beverly Potts, it was a time of innocence. Curly hair and a wide, trusting smile that seemed to capture the essence of youth itself. Beverly was the kind of child who radiated warmth, a lively girl with an adventurous spirit who loved life. She had a special place in her heart for music, and her love for it was apparent to everyone around her. She was the life of any room, always moving to a rhythm only she could hear, drawing people in with her joyful energy. That day, August 24th, 1951, was supposed to be a normal summer evening. Beverly, along with her friends, had attended a neighborhood festival at the Edgewater Park Amphitheater. It was a festive occasion. Balloons, music, laughter, the smells of cotton candy in the air. For a child like Beverly, it was the perfect evening, filled with excitement. She was supposed to be home shortly after the event, but the promise of the night, like so many others, would quickly turn into a nightmare. Around 9:30 p.m., Beverly told her friend she was leaving. She was to walk the short distance home, a route she knew well. She'd walked it 100 times before. It was just a few blocks from the park to her home, and she had always enjoyed this little stroll in the warm summer air. It was only a matter of minutes before she would be back. With her family, Beverly never made it home. The evening started like any other evening had. Beverly's parents, Herbert and Margaret Potts, didn't initially worry. She had always been responsible, and the neighborhood was peaceful. But as the hours ticked by, they began to realize something was terribly wrong. When Beverly's sister went looking for her, she found no sign of her. Not on the usual route, not on the sidewalk, not anywhere. The Potts family immediately called the police. The neighborhood was thrown into chaos as word spread of Beverly's disappearance. Small, tight-knit community, which had never known fear, was now filled with uncertainty and dread. It wasn't long before Cleveland's largest manhunt in history was underway. The search began that night and continued for weeks. The city of Cleveland came together, volunteering to search local parks, neighborhoods, and nearby woods. Police interviewed everyone who might have seen Beverly that night, retracing her steps from the festival, but there was no sign of her. Flyers were posted everywhere. Beverly's face, bright and smiling, seemed to stare at every corner of Cleveland. But despite the large-scale effort, the case was eerily silent. Every lead turned out to be a dead end. The search expanded, spanning further than just Cleveland, but still there was no trace of Beverly. The mystery surrounding her disappearance deepened, and questions started swirling. Had she been taken by someone she knew? Was it a random act? Every possibility seemed to bring more confusion than clarity. Part 3. Theories and the motorcycle. As the days turned into weeks, the community grew more desperate. The search, though vast and exhaustive, was still without answers. The Potts family clung to the hope that Beverly was alive, that she had simply wandered off or was being held against her will. But with each passing day, the truth seemed farther away. Then, a lead came that would forever link Beverly's case to one of the darkest theories that haunted the city at the time: the possibility of a motorcycle gang's involvement. Cleveland had a growing problem with motorcycle gangs in the 1950s. They were known for their rebellious behavior, often associated with crime, and had a reputation for terrorizing neighborhoods. Some witnesses later reported seeing a group of men in a car suspiciously near the park that night. The car was described as a dark-colored vehicle, and a few onlookers recalled seeing it driving in and out of the area. But no one could definitively say they saw anything that would tie the gang to Beverly's disappearance at the time. Investigators were convinced that the motorcycle gang theory was plausible. The idea of young girls being kidnapped by these groups was not entirely unfounded, given the dangerous, lawless reputation of certain motorcycle clubs. But no evidence ever tied any gang members to Beverly's disappearance, and the lead, like many others, soon fizzled out. The absence of physical evidence in Beverly's case left investigators with little to go on. The lack of leads only added to the nightmare. Every year, the Potts family would go through the same cycle, hoping for answers yet always meeting dead ends. The case was never officially closed, but it became clear that without any new leads or credible information, it was fading from public consciousness. In 1953, 2 years after Beverly's disappearance, a chilling clue emerged. A local man was arrested for an unrelated crime. During his questioning, he casually mentioned knowing what happened to Beverly Potts. The police brought him in for more interrogation. But his claims were vague, and he could not provide any meaningful information. Once again, it was a cruel reminder that some cases remain unsolved because the truth is buried too deeply to reach. The theories surrounding Beverly's disappearance became more convoluted over time. Some people suggested that she might have been taken by a stranger passing through Cleveland, while others believed that someone in the community might have known her and abducted her. But none of these theories were ever proven, and nothing ever gave investigators a solid lead to pursue. Beverly Potts' case haunted Cleveland for decades. Though it was no longer the headline it once was, the memories of her smile, her kind face, and the image of the joyful little girl who loved to dance and sing remained alive in the hearts of those who knew her. The Potts family, however, never gave up hope. They continued to hold on to the belief that their daughter would one day come home. Even though the reality grew more and more unlikely with each passing year, as years passed, new technology allowed for better investigative techniques. DNA testing became a tool that might have been able to identify remains if they had been found, but no such discovery ever came. The case would remain open for years. But the lack of closure meant that Beverly's family was left with only the painful reminder of their loss. The community of Cleveland, forever shaken by the disappearance of one of its own, would not forget. The case was revisited periodically by new detectives, each of them drawn to the mystery, trying to uncover something that could finally bring closure to the case. But each effort ended the same way: another dead end. To this day, Beverly's name is still remembered in Cleveland. Her disappearance was a turning point in the city's history, one that sparked stronger laws regarding missing persons and child protection. Though the search efforts and investigations were exhaustive, the answers were never found. Beverly's case is a chilling reminder of the fragility of safety in a seemingly peaceful world. It's a reminder that even in a quiet community, evil can lurk just out of sight. While there is no clear resolution to Beverly Potts' disappearance, her story continues to inspire those who fight for justice for missing children. For Herbert and Margaret Potts, every day was still filled with the hope of hearing the words "we found her," but that day never came. They lived the rest of their lives haunted by the unanswered questions, and it was only when they passed away that they found peace, knowing they had never given up. The mystery of Beverly's disappearance remains one of Cleveland's greatest unsolved crimes, and her legacy lives on in the hearts of those who loved her, in the face of every missing person flyer. and in every law passed in her name to protect other children. Beverly's smile, frozen in time, still lingers in the memories of those who knew her, and in the endless search for answers that continues even now. Her case may have gone cold, but she will never be forgotten. Part 6. Antoinette Cayedito's Disappearance, 1986, in the quiet town of Gallup. New Mexico, 9-year-old Antoinette Cayedito was a bright, energetic little girl with a lively spirit. She had big brown eyes, long black hair, and a smile that could light up a room. The kind of child who made everyone around her feel warmth and laughter. Antoinette was close to her family and loved the simple pleasures of life, playing outside, spending time with her younger sister, and helping her mother with the day-to-day routines. It was April 6, 1986, a Saturday evening, when Antoinette's life and the lives of her family changed forever. The Cayedito family lived in a small, modest house on the outskirts of Gallup, not far from the reservation. That night, Antoinette's mother, Loretta, was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Her sister was playing nearby, and everything seemed like any ordinary evening in the Cayedito home. There were no signs of danger, no hints that anything would disrupt the peace of the night. But as the hours passed and the night grew darker, Antoinette disappeared. The evening was like any other when Loretta checked on her daughter just before bed. Antoinette, who had a tendency to sneak into her mother's bed for comfort, wasn't there. Loretta checked every room in the house, calling her name, thinking Antoinette was simply playing a trick, maybe hiding to scare her. But as the minutes passed and there was no response, a sense of dread began to creep in. Loretta searched every corner, even under the bed. Antoinette's small shoes, which she always left by the door, were gone, and so was she. Loretta's heart sank. This was no ordinary game. Something was wrong. Antoinette was missing at first. Police treated the case as one of her runaway child children sometimes wander off, they thought, and she could have simply gotten lost. But as the hours turned into the next day and there was still no sign of Antoinette, the case took a darker turn. Loretta knew in her gut that something terrible had happened. She called the police again, and the search began. In the days that followed, local law enforcement, along with the help of the community, scoured Gallup and the surrounding areas. They checked nearby parks, fields, and ditches. The Cayedito family's small neighborhood was combed for any sign of the missing girl. Flyers were posted all over town, with Antoinette's sweet face looking out from every corner. People started to talk, and a disturbing theory began to form. Could someone have taken Antoinette? Could this be an abduction? 5 days later, Loretta received a phone call that would forever haunt her. The voice on the other end of the line was faint, but it was unmistakably Antoinette's. Her voice, clear and full of innocence, called out, "Mom, it's me, Antoinette. I'm okay." Loretta's heart leaped at the sound of her daughter's voice, but then the line went dead. The phone call was cut off abruptly, leaving only the silence of a disconnected line. There was no way to trace the call, and no other words were spoken. Loretta had heard her daughter's voice alive, but for a fleeting moment, the phone call was a cruel twist of fate. It gave Loretta hope for just a moment, but then that hope was shattered by the silence that followed. Was it really Antoinette? Was it someone pretending to be her? And if it was Antoinette, where was she? Why hadn't she been able to speak for more than a few seconds? The phone call raised more questions than it answered, and it set the stage for an even more haunting search for answers. Over the weeks that followed, numerous witnesses reported seeing Antoinette in various locations around Gallup, but no one could provide any concrete details that would lead to her. Some reported seeing her with a man. Others claimed to have seen her near a truck or in the company of someone who looked suspicious. But no one could say for sure who the man was or where he had taken her. Each tip seemed to add another layer of uncertainty to the case. As the years went by, new sightings would surface, only to be dismissed when the witnesses couldn't provide enough detail to validate their stories. Loretta's frustration grew. The sightings seemed to mock the search for her daughter. Every lead appeared promising at first, but nothing ever panned out. Loretta and Antoinette's father, Martin, couldn't understand why someone would abduct their little girl, and worse yet, why they couldn't even find out where she was, or what had happened to her. The idea of an abduction by a stranger who knew no boundaries seemed increasingly plausible. There were theories that Antoinette may have been taken by someone familiar with the family, someone who had been watching her for a while. There were others who believed the man on the phone could have been involved. The police weren't sure who to trust, and the case only grew colder. Months turned into years, and Antoinette's case grew colder with each passing day. The search for her continued, though the public's attention started to wane. The Cayetano family was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, holding on to a hope that seemed increasingly distant. Loretta's nights were spent tossing and turning, haunted by the thought of what could have happened to Antoinette. Would she ever return? Would anyone ever have the courage to come forward and provide the answers that were desperately needed? Antoinette's case would continue to haunt the town of Gallup, New Mexico, for decades. Despite numerous leads, new investigators, and the involvement of the FBI, no new evidence ever emerged that could help solve the mystery. The phone call, the sightings, the years of searching, all of it seemed to add up to nothing. And yet the Cayetano family refused to give up. Antoinette's case remains open to this day. She would be in her late 40s now, but her disappearance continues to echo in the memories of those who knew her. Her smiling, innocent face still graces flyers and websites dedicated to missing children. Every year, missing children's organizations bring attention to her case, urging people to keep looking, to never forget the child who disappeared without a trace. The questions remain. What happened to Antoinette Cayetano? Was the phone call real? Who took her, and why? Where is she now, and why has she never been found? For Loretta and Martin, the pain of not knowing is a wound that never heals. They still search for answers. They still hold on to hope, even if they don't know what that hope will ever look like. The call, the disappearance, and the endless years of uncertainty haunt them to this day. Antoinette's story is a painful reminder of how quickly a child can vanish, leaving behind nothing but questions and the unsettling feeling that the truth may never be uncovered. Yet for the Cayetano family, Antoinette will never be forgotten. And as long as there is a shred of hope, the search will continue. The story of Antoinette Cayetano is not just a tragedy. It is a testament to the resilience of a family that refuses to give up. Her disappearance is one of the many missing persons. Cases that continue to haunt this country, where the answers seem just out of reach. Antoinette's voice, even if it was only heard for a few brief moments, is a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and how easily the world can be turned upside down. As the years continue to pass, Antoinette's case remains a mystery, but her memory lives on, a beacon of hope that one day, somewhere, someone will come forward with the truth. Part 7. Giovanni Pelletier's disappearance. 2025. Giovanni Pelletier was an 18-year-old young man from Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina, who had recently graduated from high school. He was the eldest of 5 siblings, a protector by nature, known for his kind heart and strong sense of responsibility. Giovanni had a deep connection to his family and a desire to reconnect with his roots. In late July 2025, he traveled to Florida with his mother, Bridget Pelletier, her fiancé, and his siblings to visit relatives. Giovanni was particularly eager to meet his paternal family, whom he had not seen in years. On the evening of August 1, 2025, Giovanni arranged to meet 3 cousins from his father's side. Bridget had reservations about him going alone, but she trusted her son. Giovanni was picked up around 1:30 a.m. local time. Within 30 minutes, he sent his mother a chilling text. "Mom, help." He also attempted to call her and other family members. When Bridget woke up and saw the missed messages, she immediately tried to reach Giovanni but was unsuccessful. Later, Giovanni's grandfather left a voicemail alleging an altercation during which the cousins had left Giovanni on the side of the road in Bradenton, Florida. Giovanni's phone and backpack were found abandoned there. One cousin claimed Giovanni panicked after smoking marijuana, pulled a knife, and ran off after a struggle. Bridget disputes this version, believing her son felt threatened and behaved out of character. The search for Giovanni began immediately. Authorities issued conflicting accounts, and Bridget criticized the law enforcement response due to Giovanni's age. She doubted the cousins' honesty as they hadn't assisted in the search. A $10,000 reward was offered for tips, and a GoFundMe campaign was launched to support the search efforts. Despite the extensive search, there were no leads, and Giovanni remained missing. Bridget's frustration grew as she felt the response would have been different if Giovanni were younger. She continued to advocate for her son's case, determined to find answers. On August 8, 2025, a decomposing body was found in a retention pond near the area where Giovanni was last seen. Authorities could not immediately confirm the identity due to the state of decomposition. The body was located by a private investigation group hired by Giovanni's family. The Manatee County Sheriff's Office stated that no immediate physical evidence of foul play was found, but an autopsy and toxicology report were underway. The news of the discovery brought a mix of relief and sorrow to Giovanni's family. While they were grateful to have found him, the circumstances surrounding his death remained unclear. Bridget expressed her grief, stating she was living every parent's worst nightmare, trying to find the strength to give him the goodbye he deserves. The investigation into Giovanni's death continued as authorities awaited the results of the autopsy and toxicology reports. The conflicting accounts from the cousins and the lack of clear evidence left many questions unanswered. Bridget remained vocal in her belief that her son was not acting out of character and that he may have been in danger. As the investigation progressed, Bridget continued to seek justice for her son. She called for a thorough examination of the events leading up to Giovanni's disappearance and death, hoping to uncover the truth and hold those responsible accountable. Giovanni's story resonated with many, highlighting the complexities and challenges faced by young people seeking to reconnect with family and the potential dangers that can arise. His family established a foundation in his name to support missing persons cases and raise awareness about the importance of family connections and safety. Bridget's unwavering dedication to finding her son and seeking justice inspired others to advocate for missing persons and support families in similar situations. Giovanni's legacy lived on through the efforts to prevent such tragedies and to honor his memory.